My dad told me that, son, they're not making any more land. And I've grown to realize that. He didn't have to tell me they're not making any more water. That's evident. We have the same amount of water molecules that we had when this earth was formed. It's being used in different places. I had a friend contact me and tell me that I need to be here today. And I've traveled all over the state for this, to protect this resource with no reimbursement center frame from anybody. So not to have a budget to pay people to come to meetings like this doesn't hold a whole lot of water for me. People do what they have to do. Back around the turn of the century, a lot of the scientists were telling us that soil was an endless resource. Well, we've heard that same kind of talk about our water. If you'll stop and look back at what happened in the Depression years in 1929, they found out that soil was not an endless resource. We had just mismanaged it. But the same thing can happen to us with water. I hear this talk about water being the new oil. I really wanted to bring a cup of oil today and see if anybody want to take a drink of it. Because water is life. It sustains life. It's the source of all life. It's not a commodity that we can market. It's a God-given right. You've heard about interbasin transfers. If you haven't heard enough about it, let me tell you what I do know about interbasin transfers. One, you take water from one basin and you transfer it to another. From everything that I've been able to read, that's an unhealthy thing for both basins. The donor basin, or the basin that's being taken from, dries up because this most precious resource is gone. The receiving basin, or I could call it the thieving basin, creates a false economy that cannot be maintained. When you look at Oklahoma City's economy right now, depending on such things as a professional basketball team, and when it's not playing, they're really worried. An artificial river that I call the North Canadian, that they're now calling Oklahoma River, to promote industry. An economy that depends upon a national disaster, a national tragedy, the bombing site, to bring people in for the dollars. You need to look at what their economy is based on. It cannot be healthy. I was told another thing about my dad. He's passed 17 years ago. He said, son, you won't see the Depression or anything like it again. He said, but you will see something worse. You will see it come to the day when the have-nots take from the haves. Well, we're seeing that today in Oklahoma. We're seeing the have-nots, people who have not managed their resources well, take the water and the resources of people who have managed it well, as Ms. Crusoe was just telling you. I spoke to the Oklahoma City Council about 5 or 6 years ago, and my message was simple. They didn't understand it. Mr. Couch didn't understand it. The people on the city council didn't understand it. My message was that things do not look the same from this end of the pipe that they do from their end of the pipe. That is a very simple statement. If you're having your lifeblood sucked from you, it takes a different look. I've heard that I was asked to mention what it's like to live with a shoreline on Lake Atoka. I live in between the two arms of Lake Atoka, North Bogey Creek and Mill Creek. And I can tell you just a real short version of what happened. Back in the mid-50s, Oklahoma City decided they needed water. They looked at the law called eminent domain. I don't think it would fly today because I see nothing eminent of Atoka and Cole County to Oklahoma City. But it did fly in those days. They got it done. A lot of graft, corruption was connected with it. They condemned, I have no shoreline. We're at least a quarter of a mile of water anywhere around the lake. Our fence line property that joins them, when they condemned that property, they condemned it under the law that they said they would give it proper protection of the waterworks. That's why they had to get it so far back. They don't maintain their fence. They don't maintain their property line. Back in the early 2000s, there were 2 grand juries in Cole and Atoka County that found Oklahoma City guilty of creating a public nuisance. What became of it? Nothing. As long as we were looking at them like a bug under a glass, they send a few token patrol cars up that way now and then. Things look a lot different from the north end of the lake than they do from Main Street of Atoka, because we think differently and we act differently. Today, I can promise you that there is no patrolling, no policing of the area that they've condemned. They still are maintaining a public nuisance. There will be hunters and fishermen, thank you, sir, hunters and fishermen coming in on the backside of our property, cutting our fences that are allowed access to it by coming across Oklahoma City. They are not good neighbors. I had a son that spent 17 years in the state penitentiary. He took a life. He deserved to be there. While he was there at Joe Hart one year in the mid-1990s, he was in a cell where there was an attorney, from Oklahoma City by the name of Carol Gregg, who was convicted of certain crimes having to do with sex with a minor child. It was a client's minor child, and the videotaping of that child that he was doing crime time for. He told them, in order to impress these prisoners of his prowess in the law and his understanding of the law, that his first job out of Oklahoma City Law School was working for the city of Oklahoma City down in Cole and Atoka County and screwing those old dirt farmers out of their land. They come pretty close to the truth. Needless to say, he got a pretty strong reprimand from one of these men's grandsons. But it's still going on today. They've taken the land off of our tax rolls. They pay nothing for our children, education, and it's a one-way street. And I've got to say one other thing, and I'm going to sit down, Senator Crane. It has been said that some will rob you with a gun. Others will rob you with a pen. And I think that's what the Oklahoma Comprehensive Water Plan attempts to do. Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Mr. Curtis McDaniel.
Good afternoon. I'm Curtis McDaniel. I'm presently the high school principal at Smithfield, also the Democratic nominee for the House of Representatives here in District 1. The issue that I would like to address specifically is the non-consumptive use in the study that was done. If my information is correct, we only studied about 16% of the water here in the state. My question to you would be, if we were to study 16% of your personal household expenses, and then took 10% of that as an overage, then would we gamble the remainder of that on a lifelong expenditure that we could never get back? And that's exactly what we're doing here with the study that we have before us. It's a great beginning. It's a good place to start, but I think more research needs to be done. The end stream that goes on, the studies that's there, there's not near enough flow meters out there. You only study 16% of the rivers that are here. We study one aquifer, and there are others. We need to do more research before we decide we want to do something with our water. It's a precious lifeblood here in McCurtain County. It needs to stay in McCurtain County. I know others have taken more time. My position is that we keep it here.